In the highlands of northern Ethiopia, where the mountains rise like ancient guardians and the air carries whispers of forgotten ages, there once flourished a kingdom that stood at the crossroads of civilizations. It was called Aksum. To many, it is a name barely mentioned in history books, overshadowed by Rome, Persia, and Egypt. But to those who look closer, Aksum was one of the great powers of the ancient world, a kingdom of gold, trade, mystery, and legends. And at its heart lies one of the most enigmatic figures of all time, the Queen of Sheba. To understand the story of Aksum, we must begin with its setting. Long before the rise of European empires, before the dominance of the Ottomans or the British, Africa was home to mighty kingdoms that shaped the currents of global trade. Aksum emerged around the 1st century CE in what is today northern Ethiopia and Eritrea. It rose from fertile plateaus and commanded ports on the Red Sea, connecting Africa to Arabia, India, and the Mediterranean. Traders carried ivory, gold, frankincense, and exotic animals from Africa, while ships returned with silk from China, spices from India, and coins from Rome. Aksum was not isolated, it was global. Roman merchants recorded its markets. Indian sailors knew its ports. Byzantine emperors exchanged letters with its kings. Archaeologists have unearthed giant obelisks carved from single stones, weighing hundreds of tons, raised as monuments to kings who wanted to leave their mark for eternity. The kingdom minted its own coins, the only African civilization of its time to do so, stamped with the images of its rulers and Christian crosses after its conversion. This was not a tribal chiefdom or a forgotten backwater. This was a superpower. But perhaps the greatest allure of Aksum is not only in its ruins or its trade routes, but in its legends. For here, myth and history intertwine in the figure of the Queen of Sheba. Known in Ethiopian tradition as Makeda, she is remembered not just as a queen but as the very mother of Ethiopia's royal lineage. Her story begins not in Aksum alone, but in the wider world of the Bible and the Quran. In the Hebrew scriptures, she appears in the court of King Solomon of Israel. Drawn by tales of his wisdom and wealth, she traveled from the land of Sheba to test him with riddles and to see if the rumors were true. She arrived with caravans of gold, precious stones, and spices. And when she found Solomon's wisdom greater than she had imagined, she praised the God of Israel and exchanged gifts with him. In Islamic tradition, she is called Bilqis, and her story takes on even greater dimensions, with Solomon summoning her through miraculous means, testing her belief, and bringing her into the knowledge of God. But it is in Ethiopian tradition, preserved in the epic text called the Kebra Nagast, the glory of kings, that her legend takes its most powerful form. According to this text, Queen Makeda of Sheba traveled to Jerusalem to meet Solomon, and there she bore him a son, Menelik. When the boy grew, he journeyed to his father's court, was welcomed, and returned to Ethiopia with a company of nobles. But he did not return empty-handed. Ethiopian tradition holds that Menelik brought with him the most sacred object of Israelite faith, the Ark of the Covenant. That chest of acacia wood and gold, said to contain the stone tablets of the 10 Commandments given to Moses, was carried away and brought to Ethiopia. It is a claim staggering in its implications. For centuries, Ethiopian Christians have believed that the Ark still rests in Aksum, in a modest church guarded by a single monk, never to be seen by outsiders. No king, no patriarch, no foreigner has laid eyes on it. The monk lives and dies in that duty, the next chosen in secret. If true, it would mean that one of the most sacred relics of Abrahamic faiths lies not in Jerusalem or Rome, but in the heart of Ethiopia, brought there by the son of Solomon and the Queen of Sheba. The legend of the Queen of Sheba and the Ark gave Ethiopia something priceless, a divine legitimacy. For centuries, Ethiopian emperors claimed descent from Menelik, son of Solomon, declaring themselves heirs to the biblical promise. The Solomonic dynasty ruled Ethiopia, interrupted at times but enduring for centuries, until the fall of Emperor Haile Selassie in 1974. Even he traced his lineage back to Sheba and Solomon, calling himself the 225th monarch of that line. Thus, myth and history fused to give Ethiopia a sacred kingship unlike any other. But Aksum's greatness was not only in legend, it was a kingdom of real power. By the 4th century CE under King Ezana, Aksum became one of the first major empires in the world to adopt Christianity, long before much of Europe. Ezana's inscriptions survive, carved in stone in 3 languages, Ge'ez, Sabaean, and Greek, declaring his victories and his faith in the Lord of Heaven. Under his reign, churches were built, missionaries sent, and Ethiopia became a bastion of Christianity surrounded by a sea of pagan and later Islamic lands. It was a declaration of identity that endures to this day. Trade fueled this power. Aksum's merchants controlled the Red Sea routes, taxing goods that passed through their ports. Their influence stretched as far as Yemen, across the narrow straits of the Bab el-Mandeb. At times, Aksumite armies crossed into Arabia itself, conquering Himyarite lands and bringing them under Ethiopian sway. This was no minor kingdom. It was counted among the 4 great powers of its age, alongside Rome, Persia, and India. Yet like all empires, Aksum faced decline, shifts in trade routes, the rise of Islamic powers that controlled the Red Sea, and environmental changes weakened it. By the 7th and 8th centuries, Aksum's dominance faded. Its obelisks fell, its capital shrank, and its power retreated into the highlands. But the memory of Aksum and the legend of the Queen of Sheba endured, carried forward in Ethiopian identity and Christian faith. Today, the ruins of Aksum still stand. Towering stone obelisks pierce the sky, carved with false doors and windows marking the tombs of kings long gone. Beneath the earth lie burial chambers, filled with treasures and mysteries yet to be uncovered. And in the Church of St. Mary of Zion, believers still point to a small chapel, guarded fiercely, and declare, "The Ark of the Covenant rests within." Whether myth, faith, or history, the belief is unshakable. Pilgrims come from around the world to gaze upon its walls, knowing they will never see inside. The Queen of Sheba herself remains elusive. Was she a real queen who ruled in Aksum, Saba, or somewhere in Arabia? Was she a fusion of traditions, her story told and retold across cultures until it transcended time? Archaeologists argue, historians debate, theologians speculate. But what is undeniable is her power as a symbol, a woman who challenged a king with wisdom, who bore a son that linked nations and who became the mother of Ethiopia's divine kingship. The kingdom of Aksum and the legend of the Queen of Sheba remind us of something vital. Africa was not silent, not isolated, not backward. It was central to the story of the world. It had kings and queens whose names echoed across continents, whose ships carried treasures across seas, whose faith shaped nations, and whose legends still inspire. Aksum was not a shadow of others' greatness, it was greatness itself. And so, as we walk among its ruins, as we hear the story of Sheba whispered in churches and sung in poems, we must remember that history is not only what we read in Western texts. It lives in the stones of Aksum, in the faith of its people, in the ark that may or may not rest within its chapel. It lives in the legend of a queen who crossed deserts to meet a king, and in a child who carried the promise of a nation. The kingdom of Aksum may have fallen, but its spirit endures. Its obelisks still reach for the heavens. Its legends still command reverence. And its queen, the enigmatic Sheba, remains one of the most powerful figures in human memory. Half history, half myth, yet wholly eternal. Because in the end, Aksum and Sheba teach us that history is not just about ruins and dates. It is about the stories we tell, the symbols we carry, and the identity we forge. And Ethiopia, with its claim to the Ark, with its Solomonic dynasty, with its ancient Christian faith, carries one of the richest legacies in the human story. The kingdom of Aksum and the Queen of Sheba, a tale where myth and history meet, where Africa speaks with a voice as mighty as Rome, as eternal as Jerusalem, and as mysterious as the desert winds.